That's recording. And here we go. Okay. It's coming up. We're on candid camera. Okay, we're on.
Correct.
Okay. I'm Paranormal Pete, and I'm on a journey to seek answers to the questions that have crossed all of our minds. What happens to us when we die? Is there an afterlife? I'm a regular guy who discovered the gift of psychic mediumship in my 30s. My passion for history and the unknown have put me right here, right now. My mantra for anything paranormal is, we don't know much and anything is possible. Join me as we find our way through the stories, evidence, and experiences of the paranormal and beyond in search of answers, even if that leads to more questions. Are you with me? All right, everybody. Welcome to the Rogue edition of the Paranormal Pete Show on Let's Talk Radio. But tonight, we're coming to you just via Facebook and Google Meet. And the internet went down at the station due to bad weather circumstances. And so we figured out a way to still come on and give you guys a great show tonight. And it's the Paranormal Pete Show. I'm your host, Pete Orbea, and welcoming you. And I want to welcome my special guest tonight, my good friend, Mr. Neil McNeill's on with us tonight. Hey, Neil, how's it going?
Hey, Pete, how are you?
Well, we're rolling with 2020. It struck again today. So we're just rolling with it, fighting that 2020. We're almost to the end. And
that's all you can do. Yeah. Almost to the end.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is being recorded, and so we'll be able to archive this on the station website at WLTKDB.com or the Let's Talk.com as well. So this will be archived. So for anybody who can't listen the whole time or you missed it, we'll be archiving it on all the places that the show goes out to. So again, we're going rogue style tonight for episode 4. I wanted to have Neil on as my first guest before, and that dang technology didn't work out last.
There was some bad juju going on there.
Yeah. I don't know, Neil, are you doing it maybe?
Well, we're going to talk about that later on tonight. about people doing things with their minds. I don't know. If I was, my apologies. I certainly wasn't doing it on purpose.
Well, we're going to have some fun anyways, because it's always a blast to talk with you about anything, and especially the paranormal. So real treat for everybody tonight, and thanks for coming on and rolling, going rogue style with us tonight. So thanks. So I just had a couple of housekeeping items. I had a virtual gallery reading last Saturday and wanted to thank everybody who attended that. It was a lot of fun. And I feel like some interesting messages came through, and people that weren't expected to come through came through. That always happens. And but it was a lot of fun, and hopefully I helped in some way. So anyways, thank you everyone for doing that. And I'm looking at doing one probably in February now. So stay tuned for that. And we're streaming live on the Facebook page for the Paranormal Pete Show. So facebook.com/Paranormal Pete Show. Now, tonight with Neil, so I'll give you a little background about how I know Neil. I met him at the Port Gamble Ghost Conference in 2011. And it doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess
it really doesn't. It was kind of like yesterday, but that was some time ago.
Yeah,
we were younger.
When it's in the good old days.
Yeah,
when you could hang around people. So when I met Neil, I didn't know anything about his background, anything like that, but I got to see you speak at the Port Gamble Ghost Conference, and I was just like, whoa, this guy is passionate about the research, passionate about investigation, and just the study of the paranormal. And it kind of just captured me right away. And your sense of the history of paranormal research. Oh, you can't hear Neil? Oh, okay. My studio tech slash my beautiful wife just says people can't hear Neil. So let's take a look here. And so I can hear Neil. Yeah, no, you should be fine. Well, it's always something.
Well, no kidding.
Okay, not getting Neil's audio. Okay. We're working on it. Let's see. There's settings here. Let's see. Because I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not muted or anything.
No, not on this end.
Okay. Let's see. So anyways, I'll try and talk and look at stuff. So Neil, just his knowledge of the history of paranormal research I thought was so cool. And it really got me even more interested in paranormal research and just the whole field in general. Hang on. Let's see. Goodness. Technical difficulties. Health. Okay. Sorry for dead air here.
Yeah, I can't see anything on my end actually in the settings.
Yeah, no.
I've got a good signal here.
Okay. So I just pinned you to the screen. So go ahead and try talking. And if everyone on Facebook, if you're listening, go ahead, Neil, say something.
Okay, testing. Check. Do we have anything yet? Are we live?
Okay.
Are we Memorex?
Can someone comment and see if
Can you hear me
we've
from the
got Neil's
beyond?
audio?
It's always something.
Yes. Okay. Well, try and keep talking here. We'll see if somebody comments.
Okay.
Okay. Nothing yet. Okay. So what I did not do that. Okay. Out. Well, I could turn on captions. You know what? You could try and mute your microphone and call in with your phone.
Okay.
Like you could open up your email on your phone and click the link on your phone and do just just your phone and see if that works.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I got the email before I mute myself here.
Well, I'll just talk since people can hear me blabbing on. Okay. All right. So one of the things we're going to talk about along with parapsychology is I was going to share the story of an experiment that was done, and it was a parapsychology experiment. And I think it's a nice segue into kind of where Neil's research tends to go towards. And so it's called the Philip experiment. And it was done in 1972 in Canada and in Toronto. And it was to determine whether subjects can communicate with fictionalized ghosts through expectations of human will. So they were going to create something and see if there could be some evidence, or would there be an apparition of this made up person that would show up. And so the experiment was conducted by a mathematician named A.R.G. Owen and was overseen by a psychologist, Dr. Joel Witten. And so basically, the goal was to create a fictional character through a purposeful methodology and then attempt to communicate with it through like a quote unquote seance. And so they made up this whole story. And Neil's calling in. We're trying this out. Let's see if we can get him and his audio. Or you could, Neil, you could also open up the video on your phone and just use your audio from your phone and see if that comes through, instead of just a phone call, if that's easier. We'll see what we get here. Okay, joined. All right, Neil, go ahead and say something.
And are we there?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. Now let's see. Can people hear him now? Okay, keep talking, Neil.
Do we have anything there? Anybody out there? Anybody out there at all? I'm calling the spirits. Will you please reply?
We're putting out the gold record.
This is like what seances used to be, you know?
Right.
You know?
Okay, one person said no. We're keep trying.
Okay.
Oh,
we'll
my
just
goodness.
keep talking. So about the Philip experiment, this was one of the first things that I ran into as far as parapsychology. Such an interesting experiment that was done back in 1972, because nobody had really taken an in-depth look at the idea of it's what I call making a test tube ghost. Can you actually make a ghost happen? And so this was quite a lengthy process with this, as you know, as this group did. They tried a couple of different methods to see if they could actually produce a ghost, and eventually what they came up with, which I'm sure you're going to tell everybody about, was rather unique and has a lot of bearing on potentially on the evidence that investigators out in the field are getting today. So, you know, the question ended up being at the end of the experiment, basically, was this actually a ghost, or was this a construct? Was this a mental construct? So,
right,
very, very interesting, and the ramifications we're still trying to figure out today.
Right, because some of the experiments that they did. Oh, somebody says sounds great, so maybe they can hear you. Oh no, or maybe. Well, I just put that I'm gonna. I don't know if that was to a comment I just did. I just put on there that we are recording via Google, and so if we can't get your audio through, then what we'll do is I'm just gonna, as soon as we're done with the show, I'm going to get the Google Meet video recording up on my YouTube channel, and then I'll post it here to Facebook, and so everybody can hear you. But for now, exactly. So I think what I'm going to do is stop the Facebook Live, and we'll just record our interview. And then, Molly is suggesting speakerphone. We could try that. Try putting your phone. Try putting your phone on speakerphone.
Okay, hang on just a sec here.
Yeah, and then and I can hear you. Anybody hear him now? We're trying different things.
Once again, I'm on speakerphone now. How's that? You get to hear me in all different dimensions. This is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize, everybody out there. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work, and I'm somewhat tech savvy, but it's 2020. Okay, now, can anybody comment now? Okay, still not on there. So Neil, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the Facebook Live because everybody's just going to hear only me, and they're not going to get to hear all the wonderful things you've got to say. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue to record. And then what I'll do is after this, so everybody listening out there, sorry about that. What we'll do is we're recording already our interview, and I will get that on my YouTube channel, Paranormal Pete Show / Port Gamble Paranormal Tours. And so after when we're done, I'll get that uploaded there, and then I'll put that upload it here on Facebook, and so that everyone can hear Neil at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and end the Facebook Live feed. But everyone, thanks for bearing with me. We're going, I guess, too rogue. Too much. We're going way rogue on this one. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and end this. And now we'll eventually get the show archive up on WLTKDB.com as well. So stay tuned for later tonight or catch it tomorrow. I'll get this uploaded on my Facebook page here at the Paranormal Pete Show, and we'll see you all later. Thanks. Okay. So let's make sure live video ended. So we're good there.
Okay.
Now you can hang up your phone and unmute your computer because we're just going to go this way.
We'll do it this way. Okay.
Yep. That'll be so much easier.
All right. Here we go.
All right. And I'm back on here. Does that work?
All right. Yeah, no, I can hear you great. So.
Oh, but now I can't hear you.
Really?
Hang on just a second.
Oh yeah, your headphones.
Let's switch back to my headphones here.
Yep. Check.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha now.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so let's back this up a little bit.
Sure, let's do that.
So we're talking about the Philip experiment, and you're talking about the expectation, and the purpose was to see, can you create, I like how you put a test tube ghost.
Yeah, basically that's what it amounted to.
Yeah, and so I have Philip's story, and so the participants in the experiment came up with this big, very detailed backstory. It was very purposeful in how they did it. And so that there could be, I guess, do you think it's just to have some sort of sense of reality to the person?
It's in the same vein as when an author creates a character. Very oftentimes a writer will say that the character comes alive. Charles Dickens did that.
Right.
A Christmas Carol, actually, with Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yes.
That the more real you make the character, they take on a life of their own, and they actually begin directing their own life. Right. Will say, no, this character doesn't want to do that. And I think that was part of the process that this group of parapsychologists and psychical researchers in Toronto did in 1972. They felt, I think, that if they could create this personage so completely, to the point where they actually had a forensic artist come in and do drawings.
Yes.
If you Google Philip, you'll actually see what Philip looked like, according to them, and how they described him. It made it that much more real and that much more present and powerful in the minds of the participants. So as the experiment then progressed, it was just very interesting to see that Philip took on a life of his own. So in the beginning, they were trying the idea of creating this character, Philip, who was a lord. He had his own castle, Diddington Castle.
Yes.
And he had a beautiful wife who was also frigid. It was not a really good coupling. I think it might have been an arranged marriage that they came up with for him.
Sure.
And he had a hot-blooded gypsy lover on the side.
Yes.
And they detailed his whole life, what his background was and his family and the manor house and all this kind of stuff. And they had this affair going on between Philip and the gypsy.
Yes.
And of course, when his wife found out about it, she was incensed and found a way to off the gypsy, have her killed. And when Philip supposedly found out about this, he was so distraught and despondent that he threw himself off the walls of his own castle to his death.
Right.
Close of curtain. There's the sad story of Philip. And so this was what these researchers had in mind. And the first part of the experiment was to sort of gather around and using sort of an ESP approach. Could they contact him? Could they, call him in from the beyond? And they tried that for a year, number of different methods of doing it, and it didn't work for them. And then one of the researchers got the brilliant idea that, physical mediums back in the day at the turn of the century, when you had all the great seances, the golden age of spiritualism going on, people sat around a table and they held hands and they darkened the lights in the room and everybody was very quiet. And they had this Q&A session. And I thought, well, it worked for them, at least in some cases with the more believable, compelling mediums. So they thought maybe we should try that. Everything else we've tried hasn't worked at this point.
Right.
And they did. And what happened.
Yeah. Didn't they actually, at one point, a table actually tilted up on its side?
It did actually on a couple of different occasions. The first time that they did this, or the first couple of times that they did this, the researchers were asking, is Philip here? Can we speak with Philip? And again, this is a completely imaginary person that they made just for the purposes of the experiment.
Right.
And within those first couple of sessions, as everybody's gathered around the table in the dark holding hands, somebody knocked on the table, just like they used to do in the old seances.
Right.
Looking around at each other. Okay, was that you? Was that you? Wasn't me. Were you cracking your toes? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And because they're researchers, they had controls in place that they were looking for things like this, fakery and chicanery and whatnot. But it turned out to be the real thing, that they actually started getting raps on the table.
Right.
Because of that, if you've got, one knock for yes, two for no, or whatever, you can actually hold a pretty decent conversation with somebody. And they did. They were actually able to have this conversation with
a made-up
with a made-up person, with this alleged ghost.
Right.
And the thing is that this particular aspect of the experiment went on for a long time. They met several times, I think, over the course of a year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
At this point, to contact him and get more information from him and ask him more questions about his life. And interestingly, two things happened. Number one, it turned out that Philip, whoever Philip ended up being, Philip only could answer questions based on knowledge within his lifetime. So in other words, if you were a lord from the 16th or 17th century, you wouldn't know anything about Boeing 747s. You wouldn't know anything, about polyester. And he didn't have any knowledge. He couldn't answer those questions, but he could give detailed responses to questions that were technically within his knowledge base.
Wow, that's a really interesting point. That's really cool.
Yeah, it kind of is. And if this was something just run of the mill or fakery or something like that, somebody might not be that detailed. They might not be that paying close enough attention. So that was one interesting thing. The other interesting thing that happened with this experiment was that as time went on, Philip's responses went from being just raps or knocks on the table to breezes through the room when all the doors and windows are shut, electrical interference with the lights, or radio, I think, if they had, or recorders. They actually had, the old analog bulky recorders, 1972, and they would have some electrical issues with that. In some of the sessions, objects began to move. And so, as you mentioned, the table actually tilted up on its side, on two legs, I think, on one leg, something like that. It moved around. It actually, in one of the sessions, it cornered one of the researchers. It just slid across. If you've ever seen a demonstration of table tipping, this happens. It just slid right across the room and cornered somebody. One of the really fascinating things that happened was one of the researchers during one of these sessions wasn't feeling well and was in another room, like down the hall, just lying down. And they contacted Philip and asked if he would go and check on this other person who was not present. They didn't say why. And they waited a little bit. And when Philip made his presence known again, said he was back, and they interviewed him about what he had seen, he was able to accurately describe who the person was, what they were doing, in what position they were lying down in, that sort of thing, all the details that were happening that nobody in the room could see at that point. So you have all of these wonderful things in this progression that the more they began to interact with him or believe in him, if you will, the stronger he got, the more interactive he became. And the crowning achievement really was that after about a year of doing this, they decided that it was so predictable, it was so reliable to have Philip present whenever they got the group together, that they would take him on national television, live on national Canadian television. And they brought the group in, and there exists some film of this, little film clips that you can find. They did the experiment live on the air, and Philip was there. He replied. He did the things that he was used to doing in the sessions. And interestingly enough, up in the booth, up in the control booth, they reported having electrical issues at the time that Philip was present, not before, not after. And they've been doing this live show for who knows how long, and they never had this kind of interference before.
Because they've got their equipment dialed in.
Exactly. It's top of the line. You're doing this show every night, so they couldn't explain it. So you had this really amazing interactive experience, this full immersion experience with a theoretical ghost. And the question is, was this just something that they created that took on a life of its own? Was this actually a ghost? Did they suddenly tap into an actual historical person? And
they kind of matched some of the story.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is pretty much how they ended the experiment, as I understand it, is essentially saying during one of the sessions, admitting that they had created Philip from the beginning, that he was just a construct, that he was from their imagination collectively. And after that, they didn't have any more contact with Philip. Philip wouldn't appear.
Weird.
And then the rest of the story is that other psychical researchers, other groups, other parapsychology groups, even to this day, created their own Philip experiments. And many of them had very similar results. There was one known as the Lilith experiment.
And Humphrey.
And Humphrey.
Humphrey.
And in fact, if you can find the book, it's out of print. It's just simply called The Philip Experiment, which is written by Dr. Owen, who spearheaded this thing, gives step-by-step instructions on how to create your own Philip. how to get
Oh,
people
that's
together.
uh-oh.
And so, the next party you have, woohoo, forget Twister, let's make a ghost. So
Yeah.
uh, it's just a very, very interesting concept first to come up with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Can you make a test tube ghost? And then actually try several different methods and find one that does work. And
And
then
be
work
able to repeat
so
it.
well, yeah, to be able to repeat it and do it reliably,
Yeah, that's
which
crazy.
is astonishing. And then have other groups be able to replicate it and have their own very similar experiences with it. So
So do you think do you think that this experiment and kind of what it led to with like you said, a step by step and other groups being able to do this, do you think that that was like an advancement in the field of parapsychology?
I think it was an advancement in the field of psychical research. And there's a bit of a difference between psychical research and parapsychology, depending
Sure.
on who you ask.
Yeah.
Strictly speaking, parapsychology deals with laboratory studies under controlled conditions.
Okay.
Things that you do in the field, by and large, are often referred to as either field studies or psychical research, just like it was known back in the turn of the century with the Society for Psychical Research when they were doing their stuff in the field. But to answer the question, was it a step forward? I think it was a really intriguing experiment that does not prove anything,
Sure.
and on its own is not necessarily evidence of anything in particular.
Right.
But taken as a whole, when you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 groups over periods of time repeating that experiment, and again having very similar responses and
Yeah.
outcomes, then you have to start saying, okay, there's something to this. There is something going on here that is just beyond, well, let's make a ghost. There is an act of creation, if you will, going
Sure.
on. It's kind of the modern paranormal Prometheus, to mix metaphors. You've got these Dr. Frankensteins basically creating their monsters and trying to control them, trying to
Right.
get answer questions and do all of this sort of thing. So as an advancement, I think its value in the long run
Right.
is an example of what the human mind can do, what the power of intention can do.
Right.
And further, if you believe in the power of psychokinesis, mind over matter, the ability to have a physical effect on your environment or on a
Sure.
system, that becomes a very interesting idea, that they were
Of
able
course.
to, as a group, as a almost like a thought experiment, create a physical presence,
Right.
create physical phenomena, just like in the old seance rooms, just like the physical mediumship that happened, again at the turn of the century.
Right.
That I believe not all of which was fakery. I do believe that there were some very real and compelling cases from that period in time. So it sort of stands to reason that there is a psychokinetic connection with these experiments, with the Philip
Right.
experiment and the Lilith experiment, because you have to have those people present in order for that entity
Work. Right.
to be there and to manifest and to work. So if we kind of leapfrog, and I know it's a bit of a jump, but if we go from the Philip experiment to psychokinesis, being able to move objects, being able to create weather, being able to start fires, teleport things, for which there is quite a bit of evidence on those. Then you think, well, okay, so that was a concerted effort between people of like minds trying to achieve a result, right?
Right. Right.
We're doing that in the field with the Philip experiment. You do that in the laboratory with parapsychology experiments. So what happens when you've got paranormal investigators or ghost hunters in the field, a group of like-minded people several of whom more than likely are psychically gifted. I believe everybody is, but to a degree, a lot of groups use psychics, use mediums. Many people have latent psychic ability. So you've got these groups going out into situations where they're thinking paranormally, they're thinking about ghosts, thinking about what's in that house, they're thinking about what's been disturbing these people and all these other things. Is it possible then that, at least in some cases, perhaps in many cases, are investigation groups helping to create their own evidence?
I think that is an extremely valid point. And that's something that's easily forgotten when you're a team and you're doing lots of investigations. And I was going to say, does the psychokinesis and, I guess the ESP of the people, specifically in these experiments, is what they experienced in a sense a poltergeist?
Really good question. And to answer it very, very generically, yes, you could say that that's a poltergeist. The popular idea of a poltergeist up until about 1980-ish was that it was a certain type of ghost that was, I don't want to say necessarily malicious, although it could be malevolent, but was very disruptive. It was sort of like the house guest that didn't want to leave. And through tantrums, you have a lot of physical activity going on, doors slamming, pots and pans being thrown, sometimes even scratches and bites and things like that. Through research from a number of parapsychologists, William Roll being one of those, we revised the idea of what a poltergeist actually is, that it is not a separate ghost itself, but that it is I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, a mental emotional construct
from us.
Yes, from us. There's usually one person. I did have a case where actually there were two agents in the same household. But usually it's one person who is undergoing an enormous amount of stress in their life, doesn't handle stress very well, doesn't realize that they've got psychic ability or psychokinetic ability in particular. And basically throws a psychic tantrum without knowing it.
And it just appears to be activity that's around them.
Exactly. And it follows them around. Oftentimes in poltergeist cases, the technical term is recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK. You can see why we shorten it to RSPK. But essentially that says what it is, that you've got a psychokinetic element that's happening regularly, it's recurring, and it's recurring spontaneously. Nobody knows when it's going to happen, it just does. But it does it over a period of time. So those are the things that we have when we're talking about a poltergeist now. So when you look at the Philip experiment, you could say that it was a very well-heeled poltergeist. It was a very well controlled RSPK event that happened on a regular basis. And so then couldn't you say that if investigators and researchers going into the field are doing this unwittingly, that's the important thing. I'm not claiming that people are doing this on purpose. They're doing it unwittingly. Isn't it possible that that's the same, at least in the same vein, if not the exact same phenomena that's going on? It seems, just from all indications, it's very close.
Well, especially if there's a location, and I think you have to start looking at locations that are, well documented, well known, places that have a haunting, or places where apparitions, or where there's a lot of activity that's reported. Or maybe they repeat investigate at a location. They're going to have those expectations, and they're, like you said, they're going to be thinking about, there's the story of this person up in the bell tower and this, and they're going to be thinking about that. And last time we were here, we heard a voice, and they're going to be thinking about that voice. I've kind of wondered that with the Walker-Ames house too. Just with, maybe when we do hear a disembodied voice, oh, who is it really? I mean, we don't really know. Could it be like like Annabelle that's in there?
Right.
That voice, because we heard that voice. Well, I feel like I've heard it numerous times, so I hope I'm not the agent. But
it's all your fault.
But yeah, but when people come in, they may have heard that story. They may, they heard of different stories about the Walker-Ames house, and so they're thinking about it beforehand. And so, are they furthering that, or at well-known haunted locations? I mean, that's a question that I think it's a tough one to think about. And I think most people don't want to think about that, but I think you have to be aware of it.
I think you're right. I think most people don't want to go there, but you have to if you're really wanting to do good investigation. If you're wanting to have really proper protocols, you have to take that into account. And as you say,
Right.
If you're going on a paranormal investigation, you say, okay, Friday night we've got this investigation. We're going up to Bellingham to do this investigation of a private house. You're front loaded. There's no way that you can then take that information back. You're going to a place that at least has been purported to have this alleged activity. You don't know, you weren't there at the time that it was originally experienced, but you assume, as we all do, that people are telling the truth. Okay, which is a whole other show.
Sure.
But you're going with the idea that at least these people's story might have some credence to it, and that's what you're there to find out.
Yeah.
So you've primed the pump. You're front loaded with that information. When I've taught classes on paranormal investigation, one of the things that I've always sort of teased students with is I will take them to a location. You go through the class, you learn how to do at least some scientifically based investigation and technique. And then I take you to a location so you can practice that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've teased students for years, perhaps unfairly, that one of these days I'm going to take a group to an unhaunted location, to a location that has zero history of activity. And I'm not going to tell you.
If it is.
That's right. And I'm going to throw you in there and you're going to do your investigative technique. And if you're doing it properly, you're probably going to come up with nothing. That's the idea.
Right.
Because there's nothing going on there. There's nothing that's been reported there. So, that's one of the controls that you can sort of introduce into field investigation.
Right.
And I actually would encourage investigation groups, and do encourage investigation groups, to try that with new recruits, especially when it comes to using psychics and mediums.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so, how do you kind of get around that, going to a place that is haunted, and how can you kind of have an unbiased expectation going into it? So maybe, does that mean maybe teams should try and investigate locations that don't have activity, to kind of I guess it checks their investigation protocols and how they do it. Is that like a good way to help kind of get around, even if you're going to a place and you've heard these stories, that story?
I think it's an excellent way to go about doing that for a number of reasons. Number one, it allows you to test out your equipment. If you're using equipment, if you're using tri-field meters, if you're using recorders and cameras and all kinds of other things, it allows you a fairly controlled environment that has nothing going on.
Right.
It has a flat baseline there. There shouldn't be anything happening, so that you can really learn what the norm is,
right.
how these pieces of equipment function in quote unquote the normal world.
Right.
And that goes the same for psychics and for mediums. There was a parapsychologist, Gertrude Schmeidler, who was to me a giant. She's like one of my personal heroes in paranormal investigation. one of the things that she did as a parapsychologist was she was pretty much the first person to actively use psychics and mediums on investigation in the field in a scientific manner, in a controlled way, controlling them with protocols. And how she did that, a couple of different ways, but the main way was she gave no information whatsoever to the psychics and the mediums.
Going in blind.
You went in as blind as you could be. Now, you know that this person is a parapsychologist and that they run experiments in field investigation, so you can't completely dismiss the idea that, oh, I could be going to a haunted house. But because they give you no information, and they either just give you the location or they have somebody come pick you up and take you to the location, so you really don't know where you're going.
Right.
And you have zero contact with anybody else. So the psychics and the mediums go in first.
And basically take notes.
And what she did was she pioneered the use of using a floor map, so that everybody had the same basic notebook to take notes in.
Right.
So you have a floor plan, and the psychics and the mediums were supposed to mark the areas. Here's an X, I'm feeling this, and make a note. And the time, at this time, I feel that this entity was here, or I felt this emotion here. And then she had, there's a psychological tool, it's sort of like an adjective list. That describes all these different adjectives, and basically for every encounter that this psychic or medium had, you would circle or cross out all of these adjectives that would, as a whole, describe the behavior of this individual that you're sensing. And then what she did on top of that was didn't rely just on one psychic or a medium. She brought in 4 or 5 people, and she did it one right after the other.
Interesting.
So this person had this amount of time in the house. Okay, fine, thank you. Collect your paperwork. 20 minutes later, somebody else comes in. They do the same thing. And then what she would do is she would overlay all of these pieces of information.
Right.
So you look, and I've done this with the Walker-Ames House. I don't know if you might remember from that presentation I did last year at the conference.
Yes.
I took maps that I've received from students and from investigations, and overlaid them one on top of the other, and the concentrations of X's gave us our hotspots. And those hotspots traditionally, historically in that house are exactly where people have those experiences. And that's not my technique. That's based on Gertrude's.
Right.
I'm tipping my hat to her, because that to me is a very simple, elegant, and effective way to test your psychics, test your mediums, be able to use them on investigation, and use their information as just another piece of evidence, and have it be about as controlled as any other piece of equipment. So circling back to the original question, yeah, I think it's absolutely ideal for groups and investigators to do these techniques and use them, and stick to them, because it doesn't do you any good if you're only doing this on one investigation. This should be your protocol for all investigations, because that's really the only way that you're going to get any useful data over a period of time. So
that's fascinating. Just the whole process. And I hope someday I get to go to an unknown location that's unknown to me. I'd love to go do that, and maybe even blindfold myself so I don't know where I'm going, and go and run through a place with the floor plan and try that. I would love to do that. And you've, in your classes, you've always provided the floor plan, the floor map of the Walker-Ames house, and it's fun to have it, and just to be able to. I've used it quite a few times, when I've gone in there and done stuff, and it's always the same places.
It is. It's like you and I know this.
Not all the time, but some things move a bit. But and then one thing I've noticed with that house too is different people have more experiences or hits or stuff, data collected, on certain floors than others.
Right.
For me, it's the second floor of the Walker-Ames house is where I have the bulk and feel the bulk of my own personal experiences.
Yeah.
And the most audio evidence that I've captured in the house is on the second floor.
Right.
Attic, not so much for me. Basement, nothing. It's just a basement. I just feel, and I don't generally experience anything. First floor, occasionally, but it's the second floor. But then I hear other people, and it's the attic. They want, they want to spend all their time in the attic because that's where they feel they get the most evidence that they can get during an investigation. Some people, it's the basement, and
Yeah.
it just, it's interesting, and it kind of makes me think now about what, since we're talking about all this, that maybe it's all of our own expectations, because since I feel like I've had the bulk of my experiences on the second floor, I expect it,
In a way, I think that there's something to that. There was a point, the same thing occurred to me when I was having classes go and do these investigations, and there came a point where I thought I probably should stop collecting data or flag it in my files to say, I probably shouldn't consider the data from this point on, because at one point so many people began to know about the house and what was going on there and what was being reported, that as you said, it almost became expected, because people tell people and stories get out, and
and the ghost walks really spread the stories.
And it goes, well, but
that's my bad.
No, I mean, that goes on. That was actually going on prior to I think your involvement.
A couple years.
And so, which is a great idea, because you can't really give a good ghost walk without providing the paranormal history behind all of these things. But there was sort of this grace period for a few years, when from about 2003 to probably about 2008-ish, 2010, when we started doing the conferences, that there was kind of this golden period where not too many people knew.
Right.
And so I felt comfortable taking people in, and especially people who had never done anything, because they weren't with groups. They were just interested in taking a class on this stuff. So
so it was kind of the prime unbiased, exploration of the place.
Yeah. Which isn't to say that people who have their experiences in there now aren't having the genuine experience. The thing to remember, and here's where we're going to kind of go down the rabbit hole. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Have you ever wondered how an electronic voice phenomena, a voice that you get, an EVP from the Walker-Ames house, have you ever wondered how that actually gets onto the digital media? How do you actually get that recording?
I have wondered.
Good.
I don't know if I have an answer, but
I don't know that we have the answer, but the thing is you've got to remember that a ghost is not a physical object.
And we don't have meters to detect them. I mean,
we don't. That's the best that we can do. The reason that we use electromagnetic field meters is because in some cases, the appearance of ghostly phenomena creates a disturbance in the force, Luke. So basically, you're having a disturbance in the localized electromagnetic field, or the magnetic field, or background radiation. There's a number of different tools that we can use. But this is the example that I use. For those people who have watched my DVD, I use the example of Abraham Lincoln, right? We all know what Lincoln looked like.
Yes.
So if the ghost of Abraham Lincoln appears to you right now in your room where you're listening to this program, appears to you, is that really Lincoln?
Or is it your construct?
More than likely, because Lincoln's body is buried and it's dust. It's not, there's nothing physical.
Yeah.
Added to that, when we have, which actually is more common than most people think, when you have group sightings or group ghost experience, apparitional experiences by more than one person, not everybody experiences that apparition the same way. Some people will see something. Some people will feel something.
Sure.
That's what I do. Some people will hear something, some get a combination of those, and some people don't get anything at all. And that can all happen within a group of 6 people.
Sure.
You know, if you go to a crime scene and you've got 6 witnesses, they're all going to have a different story because everybody has a different way of perceiving things. It's all very subjective.
Sure.
So if you have Abraham Lincoln appear to you and 3 other people in the room, I'm willing to bet that not everybody's going to experience them the same way. They're going to describe their experience differently. That's why we call it the subjective paranormal experience. It's your perception. Okay.
Right.
Now, having said that, if Lincoln speaks to you and starts reciting the Gettysburg Address,
okay,
there's no physical voice apparatus there. There are no vocal folds to produce sound. And in point of fact, if you were recording, you may or may not get the ghost's voice. Just like if you're recording.
You mean like actually on the recorder?
On the recorder. You may, this has happened to me on a number of occasions, and probably you as well. You'll hear it. You'll hear the voice, because I've done this on the Walker-Ames House. I hear the voice coming from the 2nd floor, but nobody's recorder picks it up. And also vice versa. Nobody heard it at the time, but then it showed up later when you're listening to your tapes at 2 a.m, which you shouldn't do. But basically, what we're saying here, what parapsychologists believe is going on, is that the simplest explanation, the most elegant explanation, is probably the one that's actually happening, is that we as observers, living people observing and perceiving these experiences, are doing it not just through our physical senses, but more importantly through our psychic senses. So when you see a ghost, it's actually clairvoyance. When you hear a ghost, it's actually clairaudience.
Audience, yep.
It's clairsentience when you feel the drop in temperature, or you feel them touch you or brush past you. And it's possible that those EVP recordings, or those visual recordings that sometimes we get on cameras and video cameras, digital cameras, could be the ghost using its psychic abilities to imprint onto those physical media, or imprint on you to imprint on those physical media.
Sure. So like, they could, so what you're saying is, let's say an entity is speaking, right? Mm-hmm. And they use their psychic abilities to send that sound of the voice to my ears. Mm-hmm. Well, but I can't really tell. Right. I can't really tell, is it my ears I'm hearing it with, or is it my mind that I'm getting it? And then possibly that could be imprinting on a piece of audio, or, whatever.
Which is exactly why it's called electronic voice phenomena, or electronic audio phenomena, because it's not an acoustic signal.
Right. It's an imprint, basically.
If it was an acoustic signal, like you strum a guitar or you start yodeling, that is a signal that anybody in the house should be able to hear and pick up.
Right.
Yet not everybody does.
Yeah.
In the cases where it shows up on your recordings when nobody heard it.
Yeah.
It's not an audible signal. It's not an acoustic vibration that's happening.
Right.
So there's another form of imprinting going on here, and that's the electronic part. Is that it's affecting the magnetic tape, it's affecting the digital recorder. It's somehow or another, your psychic ability is able to do that, or the ghost's psychic ability is able to do that, just like the Toronto Psychical Research Group was able to create Philip.
Exactly. And Neil, this is why I love talking with you. And it's probably a curse for parapsychologists, but it always makes you stop and question everything you thought you knew, because you have to go back to square one.
You kind of do.
And look at the human manipulation in an environment.
Yeah.
Our psychic abilities, whether we know we have them or not. And it just, I've always loved that you get into investigating and you're collecting all these pieces of audio, and then you talk to Neil and he asks you, well, did that actually happen, or was that your mind? And then you go, well, darn it, I don't know, I got to go back to square one now.
Because I wasn't paying attention to the time and the conditions and who was there.
Yeah.
It's all the stuff you've got to do. It's a process. It's a real pain in the butt. But really, if you want to do it right and be able to walk away with actual evidence and data rather than just a ghost story, this is the way to go.
Sure.
So, I want to point out, you said something very important there, that these are human generated phenomena.
Right.
When you've got a medium or a psychic, that's the living doing psychic phenomena, right?
Right.
Stands to reason that if you've got those phenomena, if you've got the ability to do those things while you're alive, and they're part of the mind,
mm-hmm.
we believe that the mind, at least in some form, survives the death of the body and can come back. So why wouldn't you also be able to take you can't take your money with you, but you can take your psychic ability with you,
right?
Which is more valuable in my opinion. So, but regardless of what you believe or what the mechanism is that you think is happening here, these all come from human generated instances.
Sure.
It's humans that are observing them and perceiving them, and it's humans that are the apparitions. That's not to say that animals don't respond and animals don't come back as ghosts, because they do. But these, just generally speaking, the reason that I believe paranormal phenomena exist is simply because it's part of our human condition.
It's
part of our experience of living.
And we just don't know, and probably, as I guess we'll say, on this plane and in this existence, we just can't even probably comprehend yet how it all works. That's why I would say, we don't know much and anything's possible.
Right. And those are great words, because that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and we just can't pick up on it. Well, I want to share a story with you and kind of get your opinion, what you think. So this is in the Walker-Ames house, and this was probably 4 years ago. It was probably around 2016, and I had a small group of people, and I had done a private tour, and some of them were family, and it was family that I had just met, within the last year, sort of thing. And so I had taken them around, and we were standing in the front foyer of the Walker-Ames. And just to kind of give a little context for people who are listening, is I was standing in front of a fireplace looking towards the front door, the front of the house. And so I was standing kind of in front of that fireplace that's in the front foyer. And the rest of the group was kind of in a half circle facing me. And so they were all probably about 6 feet away from me. And I was giving some history on the house of, the people who built it, and, kind of where the house came from, and the plans, and, just the general history of the house. And it seems like a few other people heard what sounded like a slight foot scrape on the floor in this hallway that was directly behind me. And Neil, you know which hallway I'm talking about. It's got the basement and then the servant staircase. Anyways, there was kind of like a foot scrape on the floor, or some like clothing dragging on the floor kind of sound. Wasn't very loud, but it caught our attention. And I did have the lights off, and I was holding my flashlight pointed towards the floor. And as I was giving the history of the house, well, we heard this noise. And so I turned, and with my flashlight, and there was a woman standing there. And she had long brownish curly hair, kind of disheveled hair a little bit, and like no expression on her face. I'd say she's probably like 5'6". But when I turned my flashlight, she looked real to me. And my flashlight got her right in the eyes, and she didn't react at all to a bright flashlight right in her eyeballs. And as I turned, the entire group saw her.
Wow.
And we all collectively went, gasped, and then she was gone. And
now, when you said she was gone, can you describe what you mean by that?
I don't know how to describe it other than just vanish.
It just wasn't there. Okay.
Yeah, just vanish. And my light, I hadn't moved my light because it was very quick. Turned my light. There she was. We all saw her. No expression on her face. The flashlight didn't affect. She didn't flinch. And we all gasped and then just vanished. And so I had everybody walk through the hallway after that to go outside because some of them wanted to leave. They didn't want to continue on. And
unfortunately, that's the only way to get out of the house.
So we went through there.
Some of them were probably pretty scared.
Yeah, exactly. We went through there, and from a psychic medium standpoint, that place was bouncing off the walls, that hallway. It felt so heavy and thick it was like walking through a thick force field, or thick spider webs through there. And I wanted everybody to feel this, because it was hitting me right in the stomach hard, the energy. I mean, it was right there is what it felt like. Everybody walking through that hallway to go outside, and I felt like they had their stomachs turned upside down walking through that hallway.
Interesting.
And then so we got outside. Now, in that sort of situation, obviously we didn't have any video going. It was, kind of more casual and taking, just touring them around. But it all happened fairly fast. I'd say the whole thing, hearing the sound, turning with the flashlight, gasping, she's gone, probably less than 3 seconds.
Okay.
It was pretty fast, but everybody saw her.
Okay.
And so I just always, that'll always stick with me. And,
well, sure.
Oh my gosh. She was like,
I'm sorry I wasn't there.
I know. And that's the only time I have seen what I would consider to be an apparition in that house.
Would you say, I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Would you say that she was aware of you?
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure, because
was she like looking at you, or
she was just looking like straight ahead.
Okay.
And no expression on her face. There wasn't, a smile. She wasn't frowning, just kind of a resting face.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I don't know if I couldn't answer that one way or the other, because it wasn't like she was looking at me. It was just she was looking forward, and my flashlight beam hit her right in the eyeballs, and she didn't flinch.
No reaction whatsoever. Here's another question. Did everybody describe her the same way?
Yes, pretty closely.
Pretty closely.
Curly or straight hair, disheveled, but it was all dark hair, dark brown hair, and just a woman that was probably like 5'6".
Okay.
And I couldn't tell you what she was wearing, really, because I just saw the face and was
right. As a psychic, as a medium, would you say that there was somebody home there? Was there somebody behind those eyes, or did you just get the sensation that that this was something that you were looking at? You could be looking at a grandfather clock that hadn't been there a minute before.
Sure. I would say that. It's kind of hard to say. It was almost like a blank stare, but not quite. Somebody might be home, with her, but I feel like it was probably more of just a recording.
Yeah.
And we just happened to be there at the right time.
Yeah, I think you're pretty right on the track there. My guess would be, not having been there and not having.
Sure.
Here's the scientist. I want to interview everybody for half an hour. independently in a different room and have people draw pictures and all that kind of stuff. But just from what you described, my guess is that what you all experienced was a classic haunting phenomena, which is a recording that you've got the recording of a person, sometimes of an event, an action, sometimes. But there is such a thing, in parapsychology circles, known as a haunting apparition. A haunting is just a recording.
Sure.
Okay. But sometimes that recording is of a person. So it can be a little confusing when you say haunting apparition. But this apparition wasn't interacting, was not really aware that people were there, didn't react to the flashlight, wasn't doing anything, just there. So it's very likely that all of you, for whatever reason, in that moment, in that place, it's almost like looking back in time for a split second.
Sure. Yeah. And we just happen to be
there. Just being able to sort of part a curtain, if you will, catch a couple of frames of the movie, and then the curtain closes again. So
it happens so fast too.
I tell you, the same thing happened to me, not in the Walker-Ames house, but in the old stables.
Okay.
Before it became the business that's there now.
Sure.
I actually saw a gentleman in a white shirt with rolled up sleeves and balding on top and a mustache, and he was standing behind some boxes, and there was this was in the summertime, and there was a brilliant sunset happening outside, and everything was brilliant orange. Brilliant orange light was coming through and flooding the scene, and his shirt was stark white.
Okay.
If he had physically been there,
it would have been a tinted.
Exactly. There would have been, he would have been reflecting that color, which showed me that it wasn't a physical thing that I was seeing, and he was just there with his hands in his pockets, not really aware that I was there, not doing anything in particular. And I believe that was, again, who knows, maybe it was a workman that was there, 75 years ago.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I was in the right place at the right time to just get a snippet of that event.
Sure.
I often joke with my students that they shouldn't be surprised if 20 years from now, other investigators in the Walker-Ames house see ghosts of them doing the investigation from 20 years ago. It could happen. I'm probably haunting that house even now because I've been there for so often. But I think that's probably what you were experiencing, and that's a wonderful story, and amazing that all of you saw it.
Yeah. I want to back up just a little bit, because there was a couple people. There may have been two people that didn't see it because I was in the way.
Gotcha.
That were over here, but
line of sight was blocked.
Everybody that was standing in front of me that had that could see behind me.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as my light hit, it was just like boom, there she was, gone.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so that house is interesting. Now, so you were on the first team of investigators to look into the paranormal activity in Port Gamble. So I kind of refer to you as the godfather of paranormal research in Port Gamble.
that always makes me laugh.
Because you're still doing it. And
well, you're here and there. Yeah. I don't get out there as often as I used to, but
but you shared your passion for all of this, and it's got people like me more involved and wanting to be more involved. And so I would say, you're the godfather.
Well, thank you. Then I've done my job. Then it hasn't been so long.
Sure. Yeah. So what, can you give us a little about, that first time coming out here, what led to the team coming out here?
How all of that happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was part of another group here in the Seattle area, very well-known group actually, that's still in operation today. And one of the two original creators of that group, I worked pretty closely with. He was also very much into parapsychology and scientific research. So we worked pretty well together. And there were three other people who were all psychics and mediums that I worked with very closely as well. So we sort of had this little core group within a larger group.
Okay.
And it just happened that we were the ones that were available and willing to go out on investigation. If anybody has put together a larger,
just so happened, huh?
Yeah, a larger group, you know that there are the people that are really interested but never want to do the actual work. You know, they just want to get all the evidence and go on the investigations. Anyway, so this small group of us really wanted to do the work because we were really interested in all of this. That gentleman was transferred out of state, and shortly after that, the other persons, myself, we sort of split off and formed our own group known as the Evergreen Paranormal Group. And because we had worked so well together, we knew each other's routines and
Sure.
inside and out, and it just worked very well. So we started doing private investigations. Now, the gentleman who had moved out of state, who had originally formed this group, had, on one of his days off before he had moved, he had taken a drive out to Port Gamble. He'd never been there before. He and his wife were on a drive. It was a beautiful fall afternoon.
Okay.
And they drove into town, and he just looked around. For those people who haven't been to Port Gamble, it's a picture postcard from the turn of the century. It's a New England town smack dab in the middle of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, in Western Washington. And he fell in love with it. He thought, wow, this is, you know, there's so much history here because everything's so well preserved. And he wondered if there wouldn't be any activity in such a town.
Sure.
And eventually he contacted Shanna Smith, who was the property manager at that time, asking if there had been reports of activity, not to come and investigate, but just, you know, what was the history. And it turned out that Shanna, in the time that she had been managing the town, had taken it upon herself to record. There were indeed a lot of experiences that people had, tenants and residents and whatnot in town. And every time she heard one, she would write it down. Mm-hmm. And she kept this book, this log. So when Henry contacted her, she said, oh, yes, we have quite a lot of activity. And he said, wow, that would, you know, I'm part of this group. It would be great to investigate out there. And she said, well, you know, we'll keep that in mind. And then he moved out of town. We formed a splinter group. And about 6 to 9 months after that initial contact, we heard from Shanna and who said, would you like to come in and do some investigation? Because we've had some other things happening recently in town. And so in very early December of 2003, we went out, the Evergreen Paranormal Group went out, 5 of us. And our first 2 investigation locations were the theater building and the Walker-Ames House at Shanna's recommendation, because she said, A, they're the largest ones in town, they're public buildings, and they're both empty at this point. Sure. And oh yeah, they have quite a lot of activity associated with them. So we went out there, and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. I'll remember we set up camp in the theater itself.
Okay.
And split into 2 groups, and one group investigated the theater building, the other group investigated the Walker-Ames, and then we switched after a period of time.
Okay.
And then came back together and put our notes together, and then went home and listened to our tapes and watched our video and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
And right from the get-go, there were things going on in both of those locations. We had, as I mentioned, 3, well, actually ended up 4 of the investigators were either psychic or had some psychic ability.
Okay.
In the theater, all independently, the psychics came up with the impression of a very agitated man on stage pacing back and forth and up and down the stairs on house left.
Okay.
Yeah, on the left side of the stage from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really agitated and was not happy and wanted somebody to pay attention because there was something that needed to be done. You got 3 or 4 people all independently writing that down in their notes. You think, something's going on here. Turns out we actually heard footsteps going up and down at one point, going up and down the stairs to the stage. And we shared this information with Shanna before the next time that we came out. And she said, well, that tracks with what we know is happening there, because we have the theater itself is on the second floor. There are offices underneath. And she said, a lot of the people that have worked or rent those offices have heard somebody pacing up and down or walking up and down or running up and down. And people in the theater have actually seen somebody on stage in that area, in the backstage area. And we said, wow, cool. All right, that's interesting. And as the psychics began to think about it, they realized that what was happening was that he needed to give us a message. The reason he was trying to get somebody's attention. And when we went back the second time, I found out why. There was an old piano. I don't know if it's still there. It was an old upright piano, destroyed. You couldn't play this thing even if you wanted to. Very sad condition. And it had been shoved up against the left-hand wall.
Okay.
Backstage. And as I'm looking at it, I realized that behind that piano is an outline of a cutout in the shape of a door. And we went back and looked at photos that were down in the museum.
Oh.
You look at the exterior photos, and in that exact spot was a door that led to stairs down that side of the building. It was an emergency exit.
Sure.
And suddenly it clicked when I mentioned that to the psychics. They said, that's it. This guy we dubbed him the stage manager. He's in charge here. And what he's so uptight about is that the fire exit is blocked. The piano is sitting there in front of it. Even though there's no door there anymore. It was there to him, I guess.
Yes.
So we got permission from Shanna to move the piano to a different part of the stage. And we did that. And then we had her quietly start listening for other reports of people. And from then on, there were no reports of footsteps on the stage or of seeing the stage manager.
Yeah.
And according to our psychics, the energy in the place diminished because of that. Now, we don't have a shred of evidence in the form of photographs or EVP or anything along those lines, but we do have the previous residents and occupants of the building, sort of their stories and their experiences backing up what we were coming up with, again, independently. And then we made a change in the physical environment that then changed the actual activity in the building. So it was a really interesting experiment in our first visit there and then our repeat visit.
That's awesome.
The Walker-Ames House, on the other hand, I should mention that one of the other things that we got that first trip in the theater was in the balcony area, where they had put in a film projector, that great zinc-lined film projector that's up there, the old 1920s style. I had set an audio recorder, tape recorder, on the balcony ledge up there. And we locked up the building and went to dinner. Couple of hours, went over to the Walker-Ames house, came back. So I was running tape for a while. We were the only ones with the keys.
Okay.
We had Shanna's keys. Got into the theater. I went upstairs to retrieve the recorder, and sitting just a couple of inches over on the railing were two bolts.
Wow.
In a cross. They were crossed.
Like an X?
Like an X, right next to the recorder. Now, I'm looking around trying to think, here's my mind trying to figure this one out. Okay, what did it fall out of? You know, so like a bolt from the ceiling is going to fall out, land perfectly on
Perfectly.
the railing and in an X with
Yeah.
no plaster dust or anything. They were totally clean. Nobody else was in the building. We had the keys. When I listened back to the audio recording, there isn't a sound. There are no footsteps. There is nothing to indicate that anyone was in there or that anything had been set down next to the recorder at
So,
all, or that the door had opened. Not an indication at all.
so a lack of anything on your audio kind of lends to that
Yeah,
it's more of a, some sort of phenomena that just happened.
right. That
Almost like, it's
there
almost
was
like it's almost like an apportion of those objects.
an apport, yeah, that
Yeah.
they just appeared. Yeah, it's actually the only time I've ever had that on a case where we've had a physical object appear like that. I know other people have had that experience, but I've had things disappear, but I haven't had them just appear out of
Yeah.
nowhere. And why two bolts? I've no idea. I have
In,
absolutely no
in the
idea.
shape of an
And
X. That's odd.
in the shape of an X. And I've always, for a couple times after that, I'd go in there and I'd apologize to whoever did it because I wasn't getting the message. I had no idea what they were trying to tell me.
Yeah.
And I said, next time speak into the recorder because I'm kind of slow on that uptake. So, but never did find out anything. And I
Yeah.
still have the bolts somewhere. I still have the bolts.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was very cool. And of course, the Walker-Ames House is everybody's favorite location and instantly became our favorite location. For those who have not had the pleasure of being in Port Gamble, do go to the Port Gamble website and take a look. There's wonderful pictures and photographs. And you can also Google Walker-Ames House or Walker-Ames Mansion, Port Gamble, and you'll come up with all kinds of photographs. It's just such a gorgeous building.
Yes.
A big 3-story, well, actually, it's got 4 levels, basement and 3 levels, Queen Anne style Victorian
Yep.
gingerbread mansion.
Yes. Stained
Yep.
glass, all that stuff. Yep.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, with all the turned woodwork and everything inside, um, and and it looks like the quintessential haunted house on the inside, because you've got all the wallpaper peeling off the plasterboard, and you've got the lath is showing, and nobody's been in the place and lived in the place since the early 1990s. And she said there are things that go on in this house, and she's had workers in the house, putting in things, repairing things.
Contract.
She's had to go into the house, contractors, and not all of them, but many of them would report having things happen to them in the house. And so I fell in love with the place the minute that we walked in the door, because it's just beautiful. And rather than being a frightening place, most people just really enjoy being in it,
Yeah.
because it's beautiful. And we were on the second floor. There's your second floor, which I also happen to think is the most active area in the house for my money. And there were 3 of us, and I was again recording using my audio recorder.
Okay.
And there were 3 of us. I was in the middle. I had a psychic in front of me. I had somebody else behind me. We were just kind of touring through the rooms.
Okay.
The second floor, there's that area that makes sort of a big loop. The floor plan is a big O, and there's a servant's passageway that bisects that
Yeah.
O.
Mm-hmm.
So the central stairwell in the house for the servants. Now, at that time, that door was supposed to be closed, and it actually had a sign on it that said this door should be closed at all times. So we're walking through that shared bathroom, and there's the entrance, the door to that little servants hallway. And we're walking through, and I see the sign, and wordlessly, we're not talking, I see the sign, and wordlessly I'm thinking in my mind, oh, it needs to be closed. I'm going to close it. I'm just going to be nice and make sure it's closed. It was stuck. So I pulled on it, and I guess I pulled on it harder than I thought, because it gave, and that door slammed, and there's no baffling in that house at all. The sound just echoed
Yeah.
through like the crack of doom, basically. And we all just did one of these, your shoulders go up and you squeeze your eyes, and I'm thinking, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. But now the door is closed. None of us said a word, didn't say a word. And we went on with the investigation. Now, when I get home and I'm listening to the audio,
Okay.
you hear the slam, you hear everything up to it, you hear the slam, and then you hear a female voice whispering very close, apparently, to the microphone. At least that's how it sounds. Say very distinctly, "Not so loud." Now, the person in front of me was the only girl there, and it was definitely not her voice. No match whatsoever. Even if she had wanted to, she couldn't have done it. I have no explanation for it other than apparently somebody was following us around,
Yeah.
maybe.
Oh, you get
And
thinking about it.
yeah, so that's that, and that was the first visit to the house. Aside from psychic impressions, marking things down on our maps and
Sure.
whatnot,
Yeah.
that later we were able to bear out from other stories and other tales from people. But that's really how that all came about. And fortunately for us, we were the first group that, by invitation,
Yep.
we were there by invitation of the property management company. We were very fortunate, and
Yeah.
Shanna was just a darling about the whole thing, and she had such presence of mind to write out all of those reports that she'd been getting for years. And
Yeah.
she actually gave us a copy of that, and we added on to it
Yep.
since then. So now it's grown, and then you've done the same
I've
thing.
been adding to it as well.
Yeah, every time there's an investigation or you do a special event or something like that, yeah, and you add to it. So there's literally this Bible on not just the Walker-Ames house, but the entire town.
Yep.
So it just became very clear very quickly from that first visit that we had a really unique opportunity.
Yeah.
We went back 12 or 13 times in that first year.
Wow.
It was the paranormal tour of 2003, 2004. We had like 12 or 13 dates. We were out there every month.
That's awesome. So you
And
guys could really kind of plan out, some controls and everything too.
exactly. And we the greatest resource was Shanna, because she had all the history of everything, and we had access to all these buildings that nobody else really could get into, that weren't open to the public, to some of the private buildings that had residents in them. We even investigated her house, the house that she lived in, the Thompson house.
Thompson House, yeah.
Yeah. And and that was just the first year. And we just kept going back and going back. And it wasn't until I started teaching classes, college classes in parapsychology and actual investigation technique in 2008, that I started using it sort of as Harry Price used the Borley Rectory for a year and a day. I got a chance to use the town, specifically the Walker-Ames house, as a testing ground and a research lab in the field. That's exactly what it was. And I just feel so fortunate and blessed to have had that opportunity. And I have a whole stack of notes, an entire file full of stuff that I've collected. Some of the most amazing pieces of evidence that I could ever have asked for have come from Port Gamble, and it's just wonderful, because you've got this whole, since 2003 till now, you can watch what's happening on a month-to-month basis. We found out that the Walker-Ames house has a set of cycles to it. This year, this kind of phenomena is popular. That starts to go away, and it's replaced by this kind.
Totally.
When that goes away, the original comes back, and then it's just amazing.
It is. I've noticed that it didn't take too long to kind of notice, I think over the first 5 years I was doing tours, I kind of started noticing different things on different floors, or like you'll hear this kind of voice for a while, and then the next year you get more male voices than female voices, or there's a new voice that
suddenly
that was there.
Yeah.
I'll share one quick thing with you, based on your story of the whisper after slamming the door. So I was doing a Facebook live stream in there a couple of years ago promoting the Ghost Conference, and I was in there by myself. And Probably not a great idea. Your own mind gets to you after a while, but I usually feel pretty comfortable in there.
Yeah.
And so I was on the second floor, and I was in the master bedroom and kind of looking down this, out of the bedroom, down that hallway towards the main staircase.
Right.
And that takes you downstairs. And so I was in there and I was just kind of asking some questions. And I had some really nice microphones that I hooked up to my phone. And so they're really pretty directional. And I had them, it was dialed in. And I'm asking questions just to see if anybody would answer back, because sometimes they do.
Mhm.
And so I asked, I'm looking for anybody who works here. Are you home tonight? And a female voice, I could hear it. I had my earbuds in.
Okay.
I could hear this whisper, and it sounded pretty close to me, that said, "No way."
Ah.
And I was like, and I mentioned it on the stream. I said, "Hey, did anybody out there watching this hear that? Because I heard it pretty clear." And so I was like, "Huh." Well, then people said it got pixelated in front of me, or like a mist or something like went in front of me.
Okay.
And when I watched the playback, there was maybe, I think it's just because of the lighting, it just looked like, when a camera kind of pixelates, and there's kind of like a wave that kind of goes through the shot. But you couldn't hear this voice. And I heard it just clear as a bell. No way. And so what I did was, it made me walk out of the room and walk into this other bedroom that's at the top of the stairs, and it's on the street side of the house. And so I walked in there with my camera, and I had, with my earbuds, and said, "Well, I thought I heard somebody." And I walked into that room, and I was just kind of turning to my left, and I said, "How's it going?" And I didn't hear anything. So when I watched the playback of the video later that evening, I didn't hear the "no way" whisper. But when I walked in that room and said, "How's it going?" there's a male voice that shows up on the Facebook Live. And it sounds like he just says, "Bubba, bubba, bubba, bubba." And it sounds like it comes from behind me.
Okay.
And so that showed up on the Facebook Live. It's from a couple of years ago, and I can't remember what the time was in the video there, but that came through, but the whisper didn't. But I was so surprised that the whisper didn't come through, because it was so loud and clear to me. But it was a whisper, but it seemed so loud, like she was like right on the microphones saying, "No way." That was amazing. So, your experiences here, I mean, you got some great ones. We'll have to save that for another show sometime to go through some of those. But I want to talk about a couple other things, and then we'll get wrapped up here.
Sure.
So you're a member of the League of Extrasensory Gentlemen.
Yes, I am.
I've had Casey Goodwin on, but you're kind of a conglomerate group that's come together. I mean, you guys are like, Wonder Twin powers activate. You guys all fit together very well, different backgrounds, perspectives in what you do for work and what you do in the paranormal field, and kind of what your focus is. And so you guys are filming The Permanence, a paranormal case study on the Old Wheeler Hotel. And I was so excited to see, now COVID and the restrictions and stuff, but it really hampered you guys being able to continue for pretty much the whole year.
Yeah.
But I did see the group doing some more filming and stuff this last weekend, but I just wanted to get a sense of, what's the most exciting thing to you about filming this documentary? Like, what's been kind of the best and most rewarding thing for you?
For me, professionally, I suppose I could say that I'm all about education, as you know. I'm all about teaching people. I'm all about bringing information to people. So this, for me, is this great chance and opportunity to reach a much larger audience, and show people what actual field investigation is like. without the hype, without the commercial breaks, without
Sure.
sponsorships and advertisement and all that running the show. That this is actually what we hope is scientifically based paranormal investigation in the field is really all about, and what it's like, and what it is like to do it long term. So just like I've done with Port Gamble over several years, we've taken a period of time with the old Wheeler Hotel down in Wheeler, Oregon, on the Oregon coast, and been able to sort of do the same thing, have this longitudinal study, if you will, of reports and activity and whatnot going on there. So for me professionally, that's kind of the real satisfying part of it, is that once this is done, it's going to offer what I like to think is a very authentic representation of what real paranormal investigation is like, and how that's conducted, and the controls and the protocols, and how we all work together and do that. On a personal level, it's just such a joy to work with these guys. We all refer to each other, we're brothers, brothers from other mothers, that sort of thing. And we've known each other for years, individually and in tandem. And it wasn't until one of our group, Ben Robinson, was getting married and had his bachelor party at the old Wheeler Hotel, that the five of us got together all in the same room at the same time, and did what we do here, talk shop and lament about how there isn't anything out there that really shows what investigation is like, and it's all scripted and all that sort of thing. And then realized, well, we could do this. We could do a documentary about this. We could do a short film. Why not? We've got the ability, and we've got the wherewithal to do it. And then we realized we're sitting in the perfect place to do that. And the hotel's proprietor was very agreeable to that, had been friends with a few of the guys for years. She took that hotel over many years ago and continues to honor the fact that there are permanent guests there in the hotel. It hasn't always been a hotel. It's been a number of other businesses and whatnot over the years, but it's been a hotel for many, many years. And so she treats them as if they are permanent guests, which I think is lovely. I think that's wonderful when somebody looks at the phenomena rationally rather than get rid of this for me. I need the Ghostbusters. And so she really honors them, and she honors the building that way. So with her help and her blessing, we've been able to embark on this mission of trying to tell the hotel's story and the permanent residents their stories, what we know of them, and our story as investigators, and share that with everybody out there, whether you're actually an investigator or not. This has something, I think, for everybody. We had initially had a release date of 2020, and we all know what happened there. All of that crashed and burned, so we're not exactly sure when it's going to be coming out. But as you said, we've just recently started back again, so filming has recommenced in the odd moments. So
I'm so looking forward to it. Yeah, you guys have done just a real neat job with the whole thing. From the quality of the filming and cinematography of it, and the story, and your experiences. So I'm really looking forward to this. And for people listening out there, you can find it at thepermanencefilm.com, and you can also find it on YouTube. You can see some of the trailers. I encourage you to go to YouTube and look up The Permanence, a Paranormal Case Study. Watch some of the trailers that they've put out for it. And
on Facebook as well. Yeah,
you can look it up on Facebook as well. And we mentioned the League of Extrasensory Gentlemen, the guys who've come together to make this film. So they also do an event called Paranormal Boot Camp. And Neil, you talked about education for from a professional sense, that's kind of the biggest part for you. And the Paranormal Boot Camp is just straight up educate.
It's an intense weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be prepared to learn when you come to them. Yeah, yeah, because it's a great group of guys: Casey Goodwin, Jay Verberg, Michael White, Ben Robison, and myself. We all have our specialities. Obviously, I'm parapsychology. Jay is all about history. Michael is all about protocols and critical thinking, and then there's the technology aspect and all of those things, because they all play a part in paranormal investigation. So as you mentioned earlier, whether by accident or divine intervention, all of us kind of came together and we're all the pieces for the puzzle, and fit together pretty well. So in the boot camp, we all have our own sections. We teach those, and then we usually take you out on an investigation if possible.
Well,
So
yeah, I'm hoping that, or as time goes on, you guys will be able to do that, in a physical sense with people. But your part, I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit. Being that we can't be really having events right now, but some of your focus with the boot camp is kind of the historical aspect of paranormal research and psychical research,
Mhm.
and kind of the history of parapsychology. So, for people out there, what are some good resources, in the times we're in, people that do their own kind of self research? Where would you suggest somebody kind of starts to, like, what's a good place for somebody to jump off into with reading and researching, certain people or organizations? What's kind of your best go to?
There's several actually. You're not you have a lot of choices. There's something out there for everybody. First and foremost, from my point of view, parapsychology. So you want to go to the Parapsychological Association, the PA. It is an international organization of parapsychologists doing research around the world. Some of them do it in laboratories, some of them do it out in the field, and it's the premier professional organization, and their website is chock full of information on all the different kinds of phenomena, from telepathy to precognition to psychokinesis to hauntings and apparitions. They've got all of that covered. There, you can join as a member and get a bunch of membership benefits from them. There is also the Rhine Research Center, RHINE, named after J.B. Rhine, who first started the center back at Duke University in the 1930s, middle of the 1930s there. And he was the one that really broke ground on research into extrasensory perception and then eventually psychokinesis. Today, the Rhine offers one of the best online educational set of resources I've ever seen.
Okay.
A lot of parapsychologists that I know, including Lloyd Auerbach, do classes online through the Rhine. So we're in the middle of a pandemic. You can't go anywhere. That's fine. They've got you covered. They have a series of classes and seminars and workshops that they offer. So you can go to rhine.org, and check out their offerings there. There are other places like the Parapsychology Foundation. There is, of course, the Society for Psychical Research, which is the British original organization that started in the late 1800s, where a group of Oxford and I believe Cambridge scholars got together and said, there's all these mediums doing all these weird things and reports of ghosts and whatnot. Somebody should really study that. Oh, we're scientists, we could do that. And they created the Society for Psychical Research. It's still in existence today, so that's an online resource, as well as its sister organization, the American Society for Psychical Research. So you can look up the SPR and the ASPR. Both of those are available. If you're into reading, oh boy, there's all kinds of wonderful resources out there. I think I still list a few of the better ones on my website, paranormalstudies.org.
Yep.
So you can go there.
There's a resource for you out there. Go to that one.
Thank you. And I haven't updated it in quite some time, and I apologize. I'm not a tech person. But as far as authors, those people whose names you should know. If you are an investigator, if you are a ghost enthusiast, if you're going out doing investigations, whether alone or part of a group, professionally or amateur, there are some names that you should know. And if you don't know, you need to go out and get these books now. You need to find out about these people. So we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. William Roll, who gave us a whole different concept of the poltergeist. Investigators like Tony Cornell, D. Scott Rogo, Gertrude Schmiedler. We have Mr. Ghostbuster himself, Lloyd Auerbach,
Yep.
who literally wrote the book, ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists, a parapsychologist's handbook. That is the field guide. You really don't need anything else other than this book, Lloyd Auerbach, and it's back in print, so you can find copies of that.
It's on my Christmas list.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. Well, yeah, there you go. So, if you're not familiar with these names, these are the people who have done the research from, the 1950s on forward. And then there are names that go back prior to that, that you also know, Myers and Podmore, and yeah, exactly. All of these people who started at the very basic level of figuring out how to investigate claims of paranormal occurrences.
Mm-hmm.
Again, from mind-to-mind communication to poltergeist activity to apparitional studies and everything in between. They're the ones who actually figured out how to do this, and many of their books and their protocols are exactly the same things that we're using today, but people don't know where they were. Yeah, and for me, you have to know where it came from. It didn't just bring, paranormal investigation did not just start with reality TV. It's a lot older than 1990. So this is the thing, and for me, this is the fun part, because I love going back and educating myself. Anytime I go to a bookstore, or I look in the paranormal section, or whatever, because there's always something new to find out about. And even in the cases where that older research has been proven wrong, it's still important to know that they were doing it and why they were doing it and what they were thinking. I've run into a number of students who had these great ideas about doing investigation. I said, that's a wonderful idea. And somebody started doing that 100 years ago. And you should read their work first before you reinvent the wheel, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. So there's just a lot out there, that's available, and I'm just kind of getting into Phantasms of Living.
Yes.
Both
volumes 1 and 2.
I'm starting with volume 1.
Okay, good.
But it is interesting to kind of look back in time and see where a lot of the thinking that is out now, where that actually how they did it. And it's just fascinating to think back in that time. There wasn't Google, there wasn't all this electronic stuff
and things like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and these guys are going out checking out mediums, quote air quote mediums, or real mediums, and bursting a lot of people's bubbles, which is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
We need more of that today, that's for sure.
We need more skepticism, more middle of the road.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, I think, for everybody. When you have your own experiences and stuff, it's and beliefs. When you get into beliefs, and it's hard to get away from that and remain skeptical. And I'm thankful to know guys like you and like Michael White to help keep me in check, keep me in that skeptical kind of mindset. It's hard to do.
To detach yourself, especially in the moment when something really cool is happening. To say, okay, wait a minute, let's step back and take a look at this.
Yeah, what really just happened?
And just going, wow, that's amazing. But I'm like you. I love having those experiences. They fascinate me. They thrill me. And I want all the answers. I want to know what happens when we die. I want to know, where does telepathy come from and how does that work and why is psychokinesis doing what it does? and I have to content myself with the fact that we don't know right now, and we may never know, and that's okay.
Someday.
Someday we might, it's that finding that balance between having your own really cool personal ghost story and ultimate truth, and they don't exist in a vacuum. They're two sides of the same coin, really. So I think there's room for both.
Yeah. Well, there's one other thing I want to talk about before we wrap up. Here on the Paranormal Pete Show, Rogue Style 2020, fighting it, technology,
rise of the machines.
Yeah. So you've got another line of work that you've got going on, and now for those out there, I hear it both ways. Is it tarot or tarot?
It's whatever you want it to be. How about that?
I love that.
Most of the time, you're going to find it kind of depends on which side of the Atlantic you're on. It's the emphasis. It's either tarot or taro, depending. One
Okay.
of them,
which side of the pond you're on?
Yeah, which side of the pond you're on. But I've also heard it tarot with the emphasis on the last. And I always say I take it from the original Italian, which is tarocchi, which was the original card game that we got the major arcana from. So I always say, I'm actually really lazy, but my excuse is I'm honoring the original Italian. So I say tarot, just simply because nobody was around when I was 16 to tell me any differently.
Oh.
But
I like that. But so tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, it's been one of those voyages of discovery, actually, this year for a lot of people, I think. But for me especially, I spent 16 years in private practice as a certified reflexologist, and which is an alternative health modality, health therapy. And with COVID and the fact that my clientele were predominantly 99% 65 and over, I dealt with senior populations, wasn't safe to be able to continue doing that. I just couldn't do that anymore. And so I kept thinking, well, okay, unemployment is fine, but I want to do something. What's the next step? And I went back, as a lot of us are doing, probably in the early months of the pandemic. We started kind of going inward once we got over the shock of I'm stuck at home. What am I going to do? People started quieting down, and all of the voices and all the distractions out there in the world sort of dropped away, and people started going inside, and I was no different. I did the same thing. And one of the ways that I've done that since I was in high school was to use the tarot cards. And I've read for myself on and off for 30 some odd years, for family and for friends. And it was my birthday is at the end of April, and every year I do a reading for myself for the next year, so I can kind of see what might be coming up. And as I was doing this, I thought, I forget how much I enjoy doing this, how much I enjoy working with the cards and working with the symbolism. And then I thought, well, this is really stupid. I could be doing this. Could I do this? I could do this. I could be doing this. Why couldn't I do this? And so I finally made up my mind that I was going to get back into tarot, but do it full time and do it professionally, because you don't have to be present to do tarot. We can do it over the phone. We can do it like we're doing it here on a video call.
Sure.
And I thought, this is crazy, but I'm going with it. I have no idea where it's going, but that's not the point. So that night I made the decision, and the next day, my very good friend and colleague Ankasha Amenti, psychic medium, happened to call me up, and she said, I've been thinking about you recently, and this morning at breakfast I had the thought, why isn't Neil reading? He'd be really good at it. And I said, thank you. That's just exactly what I needed to hear. Now I know that I'm on the right path. Okay. So I ended up creating Journey Work Tarot, which you can find at journeyworktarot.com. And my approach to the cards is all about the client. It's very client centered. So when you call me, when you come for a reading, you're involved. It's not a passive style of reading that I practice, I want you involved because we're looking at the symbolism in the cards and how that relates to you. What do these cards mean to you? What do these symbols mean to you? How do they make you feel? There are all different ways to read tarot. None of them are right. None of them are wrong. It's as individual as the reader.
Yes.
I kind of come at it from a more, I guess you could call it a gestalt, almost a psychological type of reading. Really big surprise for those who know me, right? So we look at the symbolism in the cards and how it relates to your question, to your life situation.
Okay.
And I've got a fairly irreverent sense of humor, if you haven't guessed by now. So I try to work a little bit of that into there because there's a lot of fear and stigma attached to tarot cards and readers and whatnot. You know, we're not tools of the devil and all that sort of thing. It's actually very interesting. A lot of people don't realize that there are behavioral therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists that use tarot in therapy with their patients.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's as a tool of self-discovery, and to get in touch with your subconscious and ask directions on your trip. So that's one of the reasons why I call it Journey Work Tarot, because we're all working on our journeys, our personal paths, and we get lost, or we think that we get lost, or we feel like we need directions, and we don't. We feel like we're standing still, or we're at a crossroads. So, you know, I invite anybody who has any interest whatsoever, or if you've got questions about your life or what you're doing or what you want to do and where you want to go,
sure,
the cards can take you there. So journeyworktarot.com. You can also find it on Facebook or the Book of Faces as Journey Work Tarot. And I'm happy to talk with anybody and everybody.
That's awesome. And, you know, look up paranormalstudies.org as well,
yeah,
for everybody out there. And you can see some of the resources that Neil was talking about earlier. If you're, you know, looking to take this time being at home and really expand your knowledge of paranormal research. So Neil, I want to thank you so much for coming on, even though we had this strange stuff.
There's the time, but it was
Yeah.
an extreme pleasure, and I'm very honored to have been invited. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
well, Neil, we're going to have you on again because one, I think we got a lot more to talk about that I didn't really get to tonight, and so we'll have you on again soon.
Sure.
And again, this will be. I'm going to try and get this up on my YouTube channel so that I can share it on Facebook. We had some technical difficulties where the Facebook live stream, nobody could hear Neil. Nobody wants to just sit and listen to me the whole time. So we we got through that, and so I'm going to get this up to where it'll be out there for people to listen to, and also our station, Let's Talk Radio, WLTKDB.com, will also get it archived on the show on the station, so people can listen to it in that way as well. But you know, I want to wish you, you know, happy holidays. Enjoy the, you know, the quietness of it. I think we all are in some way.
And and you as well. Enjoy this time. This is actually kind of a gift.
It is, you know, you got to look at it in a different way, and I always leave every show with a thanks to my guests and a little tribute of the past is history, the future is a mystery, but today's a gift because it's the present. And don't forget that. Hug the ones you have around you. Virtually hug everybody else right now, and don't forget to be in the now. And I'm not sure if we're going to be doing a show next week. We might be on a station break, and then we'll be coming back right the Tuesday after Christmas, and might be Miss Karen Anderson, who's an animal communicator. So I'm really stoked to have her on. But my thanks go to you, Neil, for coming on tonight. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and
Well, thank you.
Honored to know you.
Thank you for having this show, because this is another educational resource for those who are listening. Keep listening, because you're going to find all sorts of information on Pete's show.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Again, happy holidays, and we'll see everybody, I guess, probably after Christmas on Let's Talk Radio with the Paranormal Pete Show. Take care, everybody. Okay. let's see. Okay.